My name is Joe Parsons. I serve as Director of Methodology and Chair of the Agricultural Statistics Board at USDA's National Ag Statistics Service. These briefings grew out of an idea that legislative staff, as key customers of agricultural statistics, might find value in briefings about the vast data assets here at USDA, how to access them, and how to find assistance if needed. We're excited to bring this briefing series to you today. We appreciate that your time is valuable, so we'll try to stay on schedule. We have 3 speakers today from NASS, World Agricultural Outlook Board, and the Economic Research Service. We very much welcome your questions, but ask that you hold them to the end of the presentations or put them in the chat as you think of them, and we'll work through them. My colleague Marissa Ruber is putting a link in the chat to the location where you may find the recordings of this session and copies of the slides. We expect to populate the link with a recording from this session this afternoon. With that, I'd like to introduce our speakers and get going. Mr. Dan Crestes is the Director of Statistics Division and the Executive Director of USDA's Agricultural Statistics Board at the National Ag Statistics Service. He's responsible for the statistics used by the ASB in establishing estimates and forecasts of the nation's agriculture and ensuring appropriate methods and procedures are used in all phases of the agency's statistical program. In his 37-year career at NASS, Dan has spent 29 of those years in Statistics Division. Dan has a Master's of Science in Agricultural Economics from North Dakota State University and a Bachelor of Science in Resource Economics from the University of Minnesota. Dr. Mark Jekanowski, our second speaker, is chair of the USDA's World Ag Outlook Board, where he is responsible for the monthly World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates report and the work of the Joint Agricultural Weather Facility. He also serves as program chair for USDA's annual Agricultural Outlook Forum. Mark joined the World Board in 2018 as deputy chair. Previous positions in USDA include deputy director for Outlook at the Economic Research Service and chief of the crops branch at the Economic Research Service. Prior to his service at USDA, Mark was a senior vice president at Informa Economics and head of the Washington, D.C. office. He holds a PhD and master's in agricultural economics from Purdue, go Boilermakers, and a BS in resource economics from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. He was raised on a vegetable and tobacco farm in Hadley, Massachusetts. Our third speaker, Carrie Latowski, is a senior economist at USDA's Economic Research Service. As the farm income team leader, she is responsible for planning, leading, and implementing an estimation, research, and analysis program focused on the development and dissemination of sector-wide measures of farm income, value added, and aggregate farm sector balance sheet. Prior to joining ERS in 2017, Carrie worked at the Bureau of Economic Analysis for 22 years, where she was responsible for the production of farm income and employment statistics for the nation, states, and counties as a component of the Bureau's national income and product accounts and regional personal income accounts. Welcome all, and with that, I'll turn it over to our first speaker, Mr. Dan Crestes from NASS. Dan?
Thank you, Joe, and good morning to everyone. Let's just start off with the NASS mission. Thank you, Marissa. The NASS mission is to provide timely, accurate, and useful statistics in the service to agriculture. And NASS is one of 13 principal federal economic agencies in the government. Next slide. A little bit about who we are. NASS was established in 1863 and named the Division of Statistics. And our first report was on crop conditions. However, today, NASS employs more than 800 personnel. We're serving all 50 states and Puerto Rico. We have a centralized data collection and processing system, and we employ over 3,000 enumerators to collect our data. Looking at what we do, we collect, assemble, process, and disseminate U.S. agricultural data. And we do this by conducting and publishing hundreds of annual surveys and censuses. And once every 5 years, we do the Census of Agriculture. We conduct research to advance statistical science. And surely not last, but we do partner with state ag departments, trade associations, and universities. Taking a look at our agricultural estimates program, NASS provides official U.S. estimates for production, inventory, and value for 120 crop estimates produced annually, 45 livestock commodities produced annually, and 12 economic and environmental categories. This results in over 450 reports being published annually. Before we leave this slide, I think it's important that we look at the farm definition. And what NASS uses for a farm definition is any place from which over $1,000 of agricultural products were produced or sold normally, or normally would have been sold. And this is important because we use this not only for our ag estimates program, but we use it for the census as well. We don't change the farm definition between the two programs. So taking a look at our Census of Agriculture, it is a complete count of U.S. farm and ranches and the people who have operated on these farm and ranches since 1840. We conduct the census every 5 years, and it is the only time that NASS collects certain data such as demographics, value added, marketing, and those unique or specialty crops. And again, $1,000 worth of sales qualifies you, that definition that I provided on the previous slide. So let's take a little bit of time and look at some of the census follow-ons. NASS does these particular census follow-ons between the main agricultural survey census. So the Census of Aquaculture, our horticultural specialties, irrigation and water management, local food marketing practices, organics, and of course, total, the 10-year ownership and transition of agricultural land. And as funding becomes available or as we're directed to, we do take on additional census follow-on surveys. I shouldn't say surveys, censuses, excuse me. Taking a quick look at how we establish all the releases, the first thing we do in headquarters is to establish a sample design, a questionnaire design, and all the procedures that we need to get through edit and summary. And also in headquarters, we're always continuously doing research to making sure that we are using the latest techniques available. In our regional and state field offices, we do enumerator training, we do our data collection, we edit the data as it comes in, analyze it, and summarize it at the state level. And of course, we make estimations at the regional and state level. Then we move on to headquarters. At the headquarters level, we're summarizing the data for the whole United States, and we're analyzing that data and reviewing it, and we're establishing estimates for the United States. We also hold boards and briefings, and of course, we issue the publication. One thing to think about here is if we use an example of the crop report. Data collection begins the last week of a month, and then we'll clean up that data, set the estimates, and we're already publishing that crop report by the 10th to the 12th of the month. So it's a very quick process that we move to get a report out the door. Select NASS statistics are prepared under lockup conditions. On the screen, you can see a list of the commodities that NASS does under lockup conditions, covering crops and livestock items. One thing to mention right here is that we do host groups for lockup. If you would like to come into lockup and get a tour of the facilities, as well as our methods group, providing you with information on the survey process, how we come up with numbers, things of that nature, you are invited to do so. And the last thing, once you have the tour of lockup, you are asked to stay and participate in the briefing for the Secretary of Agriculture. So if you would like to do that, please contact either Joe Parsons, myself, or Marissa, and we can surely make sure that you have the opportunity to come into lockup. So let's shift to what's new at NASS. Methodology and quality measure reports. They've been ongoing for a while at NASS, but we've taken an extra effort this year to bring in grain stocks and small grain acreage from the crop side. We've had a pretty good representation from the other areas within NASS, but we've done a little more this year to get our crops on track with methodology and quality measure reports. For chemical usage this year, soybeans, we did that for field crops, also multiple vegetables. The farm computer usage and ownership survey, that was released in July. We do that every 2 years. Hemp, that will be coming out in February of 2022. We're just starting the survey right now. Also at NASS, we have a page where you can get disaster information. That is fairly new, but one thing you can do is anytime we have a bad storm, a hurricane, things of that nature, even a drought, you can go to this disaster page and you'll find information on the impact on crops and the direct impact of the storm on those things. The other thing that we did this year is data visualization. We have this by U.S. congressional districts, and what this amounts to is there's a U.S. map that shows gross value of sales and market value of ag products. And that's available at the NASS website as well. And the last thing I want to mention that's new for us is the Conservation Practices Adoption Motivation Survey. That starts up in spring of 2022, and that'll be a 2-year cooperative effort with NRCS. Within NASS, we have 10 initiatives, but I think we should just focus on 3 of those. And the first one I want to talk a little bit about is the Integrated Modeling and Geospatial Estimation System, known as IMAGES. Working with the department, we're using EDAPT, and our goal is to provide estimates that make use of all the data that's out there, whether it's administrative data or satellite data or survey data. And our goal is to put these estimates out in a more timely manner, especially after a possible disaster. The next initiative is Respondent Portal. That's a place that we're designing that will make it easier for farmers to respond to NASS surveys. And the third initiative is a new dissemination system, and that will be replacing QuickStats with a new system that is more user-friendly. Currently, we get data from QuickStats. So at NASS website, you will find under the main heading at the top, Data and Statistics. If you click on Data and Statistics, it will take you to this page. And from this page, you simply click on the blue arrow, and that will take you to a database page. Go ahead and change, thank you. Which will allow you to select what information you are looking for. And this drill down approach allows you to get files in several different formats. But of course, when you first get into this, it can be overwhelming. And that's where we'd like to provide some assistance to you. If you need some assistance, please give any of these 3 people a call. Lance Honig in crops, Tony Dorn in economics, and Travis Averill in livestock. These 3 people can assist you in those topical areas, or they will make sure that they can provide you with someone who can get you assistance to get the information that you need. And of course, we're always available by direct emails or telephones to give us, we will provide you with information as you need it. And of course, all our reports are available at our website, www.nass.usda.gov. And lastly, I want to put in a plug for the USDA Fall Data Users Meeting. That is October 13th and 14th. It is open to the public. You can register at the NASS website. Thank you for your time. I'd like to turn it over to Mark Jekanowski from the World Agricultural Outlook Board.
All right, thank you, Dan. Let me just get my screen up here, see if that works. That look good? Everyone see it? All right, good. Well, good morning, everyone. And thank you, Dan, and thank you, Joe, for the introduction. As Joe mentioned, I'm the chairman of the World Agricultural Outlook Board. Hold on, I'm trying to figure out. Oh, okay, sorry, good. All right, got the screens to, got the slides to work. So, all right, so as Joe mentioned, I'm the chairman of the World Agricultural Outlook Board here at USDA. And it's interesting, so, you know, in comparison to NASS, as Dan described NASS, you know, we are, the World Board is almost a shiny, brand new, and a very small agency. We were established only in 1977, and we are an agency of about 20 people on staff, including our meteorology group. And we're basically located, we're a subgroup of the Office of Chief Economist within USDA. So, and we're basically known primarily for one thing, and that is producing the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates report. Comes out monthly. So I'm going to describe to you a little bit about how that report comes together, what it is, and where you can find it. So in short, you know, the first WASDE as it is known, widely referred to, first WASDE was released in 1973. And there's a pretty interesting history behind it, which I won't go into in much detail, but in short, it was motivated in part by the Soviet Great Grain Robbery of the early 1970s. If you're not familiar with that, you can Google it. A really fascinating time in the history of U.S. agriculture. But one of the issues that episode really kind of highlighted within USDA is what was at the time a lack of kind of consistent coordination in reporting data across USDA, across different agencies, and not, you know, maybe a lack of communication within USDA. So the World Board was constructed in part to solve that. We are essentially a coordinating agency. We gather information from across USDA, including NASS, including ERS, and we put it all together into kind of a single composite report on the supply and demand conditions of for U.S. agriculture, for all of the main commodities. Also, just worth noting that World Board is also home to USDA's Ag Weather Group. So you might hear, you know, like Mark Brusberg. He's our chief meteorologist. He gives lots of interviews. Probably see his name out there. Brad Rippey as well. He's an author of the U.S. Drought Monitor, very active in that initiative. So we cover both markets and weather, and also, and I'll put in a little plug as well at the end. We also organize USDA's annual Agricultural Outlook Forum. So the WASDE, basically, this is what it looks like, and the link below is where you can find it. So basically, so this is the first page right here. It always starts out with a little bit of a summary overview of all of the changes that we made in our forecasts for each of the primary commodities. And then the bulk of the report itself is a whole bunch of supply and use balance sheets, which I'll describe in a little bit more detail later. Couple important things about the WASDE to keep in mind. WASDE is known as a principal federal economic indicator, and it moves markets. There's been many academic studies that show that, and in fact, it's often, you can tell just by casual observation. The minute the WASDE is released at noon, futures markets often move depending on the information that's in that WASDE, and also in the crop production report, the NASS crop production report that's released at the same time each month. So with that, given the fact that this information is very market sensitive, it has to be compiled and released under tight security conditions, and it has to meet very high standards for consistency, timeliness, and most importantly, absolutely no political interference along the way. So as I mentioned, the World Board can be thought of as a coordinating agency, and putting the WASDE together is really a committee effort that's chaired by the folks here at the World Agricultural Outlook Board. And the process involves what we call the Interagency Commodity Estimates Committees process. And these committees are comprised of representatives from the World Board, of course, who chairs these committees, but also representatives from the Agricultural Marketing Service, from the Economic Research Service, FSA, or FPAC Business Center, as it's now known as, and the Foreign Agricultural Service. And we have 9 separate committees, and you can see on the slide the list of the commodities that we cover. Important to note as well that within each of those commodities, or within many of those commodities, it's comprised of many individual commodities. Oil seeds, for instance, of course, soybeans is the big crop on the oilseed sector, but we also cover all of the minor oil seeds, canola, peanuts, flax, etc. Feed grains, of course, includes not only corn, but sorghum and oats. And so, many of these commodity groupings have subgroupings, so we're really covering a vast proportion of U.S. production agriculture. So again, the ICEC process is, can be thought of as all of these agencies together. The agencies that I mentioned, their Economic Research Service, Foreign Ag Service, FSA, and Ag Marketing Service, coming together on a monthly basis to provide the type of data and expertise that's necessary to make kind of the complex qualitative judgments that are needed to produce our forecasts. Putting out these forecasts, every balance sheet that we release on a monthly basis is providing a snapshot of what we believe the supply and demand balance is for those individual commodities on a marketing year basis. So early in the marketing year, there's a pretty large forecasting component included in that. And as we get later into the marketing year, that data comes better into shape, and there's less uncertainty. Now, all that to say, we're often providing forecasts in between times when we have data from NASS. And it's just worth pointing out here that NASS is not part of the ICEC process, because we regard NASS data, when it's available, as the truth. And we take it as it's provided to us. Those numbers are provide the official, the official USDA view on things like crop production, area yields, stocks, prices, and and consumption when they're available on those months when they're released by NASS. But worth noting again that the process of tracking commodity markets over time for the World Board is a very long, extended process that covers about an 18-month period. So beginning in February, World Board typically puts out its very first look at the or very first forecast of balance sheets for the new crop year. So these are crops that won't be planted for months until later in the spring, certainly obviously very far from being harvested. So those balance sheets are produced by us and entirely dependent on statistical analyses and historic trends. And they provide just that really first glimpse of what we're thinking markets are telling us that farmers might produce. Now, at the end of March, NASS releases its prospective plantings report. That's the first official survey-based estimate of what farmers will be planting, what they intend to be planting that spring. Those estimates form the basis of the WASDE's first official balance sheets that are released in May. So the supply side of the balance sheet that is released in May for the new crop year in the WASDE is based on the acreage forecasts that are reported by NASS in the prospective plantings report. And then the WASDE typically holds on to those, continues to report those same acreage numbers until NASS releases the acreage report at the end of June. And then with July, we adopt those June acreage numbers. And then along the way, the yield estimates are also being produced by the World Board based on historic trends and then adjusted for weather developments over time as the crop year progresses. Up until the point where NASS starts to report yield estimates for the major crops, and that would be in August of the crop year. So until August, the yield estimates reported in the WASDE are based on World Board analysis and Economic Research Service analysis. And then once that NASS data is available, that gets incorporated directly into the WASDE as the truth, as the reality in terms of supply. So again, the WASDE, it's an evolving process. Each month is a new snapshot based on improved data as the marketing year progresses, and it's updated accordingly. Real quick, so just the essence of a balance sheet. All of our data is presented in the form of a balance sheet, which basically means we monitor both the production side and the supply has to equal demand when you look at all of these crops in the aggregate. Again, production data comes primarily from NASS. Trade data in terms of imports and exports, we source that from the U.S. Census Bureau, which is kind of the official government source for trade data. Beginning stocks, so that's an important component of supply. That's just last year's carryover into the new crop year. FSI, that's an acronym for food, seed, and residual. That's for covering items, on a corn balance sheet, that would cover items such as ethanol and industrial use, for example, maybe food use as well. And then ending stocks, again, we forecast ending stocks up until the point when NASS releases the final ending stocks for any crop year, then that becomes the official the official estimate. And typically, in order to make these balance sheets balanced, there has to be a residual component because it's impossible to account for every single supply or especially demand category. And there is often going to be some inaccuracy along the way too that prevents balance sheets from balancing. So that residual component helps to make everything make sense and balance out. So real quick, just as an example, this is the corn supply and demand balance sheet that we released in September. Of course, we'll be putting out a new WASDE next week, October 12th, right as we come back from Columbus Day holiday. But this was the situation as it stood on September 10th, and the changes there, again, just to point out that each month we change, we update each of these variable categories based on new information, if we have new information, and it reports the change from the previous month, so the change from August. And here are a few things to point out. For the old crop year, that would be 2020/2021. That crop year is just about finished up now, or at that point it was just finishing up, so we're just kind of truing up data, finalizing our assessment of that year. But the new year is just getting underway, so we got some lots of new information from NASS with regard to harvested area and yield, increased corn production estimate by quite a lot, so we allocated that increased supply across the demand components as we think is most appropriate. For example, higher crop would mean, larger opportunities for exports. It's going to also mean lower prices, increased feed use, etc. So basically, based on that information that we get from NASS on the day of lockup, we adjust our balance sheets accordingly to make that new production information fit in terms of a supply and demand balance. And then we also report, of course, supply and demand balance for the global market as well. And here, just real quick, in terms of production, we increased our production estimate a fair amount, and in September, that's driven largely by the changes in the U.S. And with those increased production, it allocates to higher feed use in places like China and the U.S. and Canada. Increased trade from places like the U.S. and in Argentina, and higher ending stocks, which we believe would be held in China and the U.S. So that's kind of the WASDE at a glance. Just a couple real quick points in terms of kind of thinking about the commodity outlook more broadly, and how things change, and kind of the importance of the World Board monitoring supply and demand conditions, commodity outlook conditions continuously over time. Just thinking back, just to pre-pandemic times, a year and a half ago, early 2020, almost 2 years ago now, the most U.S. commodity, most U.S. commodity situation outlook could be described as experiencing very large carryover stocks despite a relatively small 2019 crop and poor weather. Sluggish exports. Recall that China's phase 1 deal was signed, but it didn't really begin to show an impact until much later in the year. Lots of demand uncertainty due to the pandemic, and prices were at multi-year lows because of that uncertainty and because of those large supplies hanging over the market. But then later in that same year, late 2020 into early this year, the situation turned around quite dramatically. We saw surging U.S. exports to China as those phase 1 commitments started to kick in, and as China kind of admitted to the world that they really need a lot of U.S. corn and a lot of U.S. soybeans. That supported prices. Meat demand remained strong despite the pandemic, and there were some supply chain bottleneck issues there as well that supported wholesale prices along the way. And we saw, through earlier this year, many commodity prices climbing to multi-year highs. And now fast forward to Late summer, early fall this year, the situation has changed a lot over the past 2 years. Now we're looking at very tight carryover stocks, relatively tight, I should say, for most crops. Relatively, large corn and soybean harvests expected this year. We had pretty good weather overall, but it was very uneven, very, good conditions in the eastern part of the Corn Belt, pretty poor in the western Corn Belt to northern plains. So still some uncertainty there on how that will shake out. Commodity prices are high, but certainly off their peak in recent weeks and months, but still a lot of uncertainty with it regarding things like export demand, economic growth, the implications of the pandemic and Delta variant or maybe new variants, et cetera. So it really highlights why we watch these issues so closely and provide updated information each month. Finally, I'll just wrap up here with a place where you can find find the information on our websites, and also just a quick plug for the Ag Outlook Forum, which is scheduled for February 24th and 25th. It'll be a virtual forum again this year, as it was last year. Encourage you to check back on our website. Registration should be opening probably by early November. So hope you can attend and encourage you to sign up. And with that, I will turn it over to Carrie Latkowski from ERS.
Thank you, Mark. Let me get my slides up. Great. Well, thank you. If you don't know, the Economic Research Service, its mission is to anticipate trends and emerging issues in agriculture, food, and the environment, and rural America. We are a federal statistical agency, but we also conduct high quality and objective research. We produce over 80 data products, but I really only have time to talk about one today, one of our premier data products, the ERS Farm Income and Wealth Statistics Program, which estimates, forecasts, and explains the economic performance of the farm sector. So it gives like a big picture of what's going on. It provides guidance to policymakers, lenders, agricultural input suppliers, commodity organizations, farmers, and others with an interest in the health of the farm sector. With this program, we put out a lot of data, and I'm going to give you just a really brief overview and show you some examples of the kind of information that we have. We produce annual and national historical estimates. We have US estimates back on farm income back to 1910, and we have state level estimates back to 1949. For the estimates that we produce, we rely very heavily on data from NASS, including the Census of Agriculture and their annual survey programs that Dan talked about earlier. We also produce national short-run annual forecasts. So currently we're only forecasting out through 2021. For these forecasts, we use the WASDE projections of domestic commodity production and prices that Mark was talking about. This first link here will take you to our data files and our data visualizations. And then the forecast discussion, the second link, we have a written discussion of our latest forecasts along with some nice charts if you're interested. We are currently forecasting farm sector profits or income will rise in 2021 relative to 2020. As shown in this chart, which is featured on our data discussion, but also in the summary of data findings on our data product page. We have two primary measures of farm income that are shown here. Net farm income, which is a broad measure of the profits earned by farmers, farm operations, and others who have a share in the risks of production. It is generally just net income. It's income that the farmers earn, less expenses that they have to incur to produce their output. The net farm income measure includes both non-cash and cash forms of income and expenses, while the net cash farm income just looks at the cash in cash out. In 2021, the forecasted increase in net income, both measures, is largely due to higher cash receipts or sales of agricultural commodities, which are anticipated to more than offset the higher production expenses that we think farmers will see in 2021, and a decline in direct payments from farm programs. That's including a decline in COVID-19 federal assistance to farmers. All of this data and underlying our estimates and our forecast is available on our data product page. We have interactive tables on net income, cash receipts by commodity, government payments by program, production expenses, and the farm sector balance sheet. I think exploring what the files we have available can be one of the best ways to get a sense of the scope of the data that we have. We also have a number of data visualizations, which you can use to explore our data through charts and maps. This is our Farm Income Atlas, where you can map and compare components of farm income across all states. Here I've selected to look at direct government payments in 2020. So these are payments made directly to farm operators from federal government programs. So here, Iowa, it led the nation in total government payments in 2020 at $3.6 billion. If you change the units, you could see that in Iowa, payments increased 75% in 2020. That was largely the COVID financial assistance. And it accounted for 12% of gross farm income in 2020. The next data visualization allows you to get some quick statistics about the farms in a particular state. Here we have Kansas. In 2020, net farm income was at its highest level since 2013, and it ranked 6th across all 50 states. My favorite feature of this data visualization is that it gives you the top 5 cash receipt commodities in any given state and the top 5 production expense items. In Kansas, cattle and calves accounted for the top, it was a leading commodity in the state, and livestock purchases was the single largest expense item in 2020. In addition to providing data on farm income, we also have data on the level of assets and debt held by the farm sector. This is shown in our farm sector balance sheet. Here, I've chosen to look at farm sector real estate and non-real estate debt. Most of the growth in debt since about 2000 has been in real estate debt. That's the top green line. But in 2021, both types of debt are forecast to decline when adjusted for inflation. We release and update our data product, our forecasts and estimates 3 times a year. Back in February, we put out our first US forecast for 2021, and we updated our forecast for 2020. On September 2nd, we released an updated 2021 US forecast using new data that became available since February, and including the August WASDE report. And I thought Mark gave a great overview of how data becomes available over the year, and that greatly influences our forecasts. And we put out our first US and state level estimates for 2020 using survey-based data from NASS. So like with the WASDE, we take the NASS, as a given, as what occurred. On December 1st, we will update our 2021 forecast again. And then we'll have our first forecasts for 2022 next year in early February, coinciding closely with the Ag Outlook Forum that will be later that month. ERS produces over 80 different data products, all of which are available on our website, and some are updated as frequently as monthly. Here are just a few examples of what we put out. regularly. The commodity outlook reports, these are by some of the same people who contribute to the WASDE projections. And we have them for a variety of crops and livestock. We also have data on commodity costs and returns, looking at how much it costs to produce, say, corn, wheat, or soybeans. We have a food price outlook where we look at the consumer price index and producer price index for food, both historical and forecasts. We have bioenergy statistics that tell us about ethanol and biodiesel production, consumption, and trade. And information on US and international food security. We also have some data out there on nutrition. Kept it brief, I hope, so we can have plenty of questions, but please feel free to contact me or my team directly, and we'd be happy to help you with using the data. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Joe.
Great. Well, we have a few minutes left. We would love to have any questions you might have for the panel. And so you're welcome to take yourself off mute or go to the chat, whatever you prefer. But we love to have your questions. Well, I'll ask a question to get us started. How about that? Carrie, what would you say your most popular data product at ERS is?
Wow, I'm going to be biased and say it's the farm income because it's the one I work on. And it is one that we put a lot of resources into. And it combines, I hope I made the point, that it combines data and analysis from all over USDA and ERS. So I think it's a good synthesis of a lot of the information that we put out. So I think our commodity outlook reports are also very popular, but you know, there's something for everyone, I think, in what we put out.
Carrie, I may have missed it, and I apologize if I did, because I was distracted for a moment. Did you mention your charts of note?
No, thank you. Yes, we put out charts of note. I think we're back on schedule to producing them every day. They come out or almost regularly throughout the week. That just highlight a key data finding, research, a data product that we think is relevant. And you can get them in you can get them emailed to you every day if you want notice of, you know, they're just really short. The idea is just to give a quick snapshot or a quick summary of an issue in a visual graphic kind of presentation. So it's fun to subscribe to and get those in your inbox every day.
Great. I'll let you throw that in the chat if you can find a link for folks. And Dan, you know, we do a lot of cooperative agreements. I know you touched on that a little bit. You want to talk maybe just a little bit more about how NASS works, you know, with state departments of agriculture and universities and our cooperative agreement with the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture?
Sure, Joe. Well, starting off with our enumerators are actually employed by NASDA, and we have an agreement with them. We work closely with them, and they do a great job for us. And we have many arrangements with universities, State Department of Agriculture, to do certain surveys and programs for them. And so, you know, I don't know, Joe. I mean, as far as details of anyone in particular, I'm not sure if that would be something we should go into, but I would say that we have a good relationship with the state agricultural departments, and one thing NASS is very fortunate to have is a staff member in every state to work closely with the constituents that are out there. So that really helps NASS to be on the ground and picking up information from people as well as other data users out there. The other thing kind of not really related to this, but one thing to point out to people is that when we do put out a major principal federal economic indicator report for 1 hour after that report. We don't talk to the press about the implications of it. However, at 1 hour after the release, we do a stat chat, and we do that for our livestock and our crop reports, and it allows the data users to tweet and get information and ask questions that they wouldn't normally be able to ask in a quick and efficient fashion, and get the same reply back to all of them in a mass audience. So we encourage you to join us for those opportunities as well. Joe?
Yeah, so that's a hosted social media event on Twitter. I think it's at pound stat chat if you want to follow along. And, as an illustration, Dan, you pointed out our cooperative agreements. One way that really benefits both NASS and, in some cases, a particular state. So, for example, we do a deeper dive than we might otherwise in California, as an example, on some key crops that the state provides some support for. And that's true in some other states as well. So that gives us some opportunity. So, Mark, you touched on, you spent a lot of time talking about sort of the path in terms of supply and demand in the United States, but maybe talk just a little bit. One of our upcoming participants in, next 2 weeks from now, I have to get it straight, is the Foreign Ag Service. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you guys use the data from the agricultural attaches and others to sort of get an assessment, especially in maybe some countries that don't have terribly strong statistical systems?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for that question, Joe. It's an interesting contrast. So obviously for the U.S., we're fortunate to have NASS, obviously a very strong and reliable statistical reporting mechanism. But, for the majority of the rest of the world, we don't have that. Now, in many cases, we do. It is really up to our discretion whether or not to follow the or incorporate the production forecasts that are released officially by foreign governments. Some of them we find are pretty good. Others are a bit less reliable. So forecasting or understanding the production situation in foreign countries is a huge job for us. We rely heavily on FAS and their folks on the ground, the attaches that are working out of the different embassies spread across the U.S. They provide a lot of on-the-ground kind of ground truth for our production forecasts. We also rely very heavily on satellite data, weather data. Our agricultural meteorologists, we have a team of them, and each one is assigned a different part of the world and tracks that weather in real time to assess the implications for crop yields, et cetera. So right. So for the foreign side of our balance sheet, there's a lot more judgment involved. There's a lot more of deciding whether or not foreign official estimates should be adopted directly. Oftentimes the reporting isn't quite as regular. So earlier in the season, we're much more dependent on making our own forecasts based on, weather conditions and satellite imagery. But yeah, the foreign side of our WASDE involves a lot more resources from FAS and a lot more judgment in terms of the ICECs in coming up with those supply and demand estimates.
Great, thanks, Mark. Hey, Dan, I did get a question in the chat. I'll read it for you. I'll let you take a shot at it. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure I have at least a minute left to close this out. So with that in mind, Dan, have heard some concerns about NASS reports, specifically the estimates on acreage and yields, as farmers do report those numbers to FSA. Has there been discussions about getting those numbers from FSA rather than going through survey and estimates? So maybe you could talk a little bit about how we use administrative data and just this whole concept. Yeah, so I'll let you have a shot at it, Dan.
Thanks, Joe. Well, as you know, NASS comes out with our first acreage estimate, so to speak, our prospective plannings in March. And then in June, we're doing another survey where we come out with the acreage where farmers have told us they planted as of June and June 1st. And we're already looking at FSA data at that time. The only problem with FSA data that we have is that it doesn't come in fast enough for our estimates. This year, we were very, very lucky. We had a good percentage of FSA data returned to their office and allowing NASS to make use of it for these.
Dan, you've frozen on me.
Okay, can you hear me now?
You're back on track now. You
right.
Locked up at about when you were starting to talk about June.
I'm sorry. It's been a rough day. For June acreage, we're out there surveying, and at that point in time, we don't have FSA data. FSA data did come back into their offices at a good pace this year. In September of this year, we were able to make use of FSA data to get us a better perspective for our major commodities, specifically corn and soybeans. But that was the first time that we really had a good number to look at. Typically, it's into October before FSA acreage starts to solidify. And so, as you well know, it would mean that they would have to ask producers to get the information in quicker to FSA, and FSA would have to process it much quicker to have it available for June. But as soon as we can make use of FSA acreage, we are doing so. And obviously, we want to try and reduce the respondent burden on producers. And so that is why we have research going where we can we're trying to make better use of satellite imagery. But of course, you always have to true up that satellite imagery to make sure that you are looking at the correct commodity on the ground. But we're trying to make use of as much data as we can to ease the burden on producers. Joe, does that pretty much cover it? Is something you want to add?
No, I think that's good. One thing I would say is that, we sort of get a final grade. When you finish a crop year and that crop has been consumed, think about soybeans. That crop is either exported or crushed. And so that gives us some great feedback in terms of whether or not we got the acreage and yield right. So to those that question whether or not ultimately NASS data are accurate or not, we sort of get a final grade, and we track ourselves with our track records of how much we have to adjust between our first and final forecasts. So I do want to bring us to a close to be on time. So with that, Marissa, I think you've got a slide or two that we want to put up, if I recall. All right, so this is where you can find the recording of this and also the slides that you saw today. I also want to highlight that 2 weeks from today, and I hope you'll tell your counterparts to join, that our next session will be focused on the agricultural marketing service and the foreign ag service. And then we'll, on the 27th, we'll be back and kind of dive into the FPAC area, the Farm Service Agency, NRCS, and the Risk Management Agency. By the way, we do make good use of RMA data as well in our program as it's available. So anyhow, it's been wonderful to have you all, and we look forward to your feedback. So with that, we'll bring this to a close, and thank you very much.